Have you ever wondered what would happen if you stopped running from discomfort and actually listened to what it was trying to teach you? And have you ever asked yourself why some people seem to find peace not by escaping life, but by seeing life more clearly than everyone else? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to walk through a story that has traveled through centuries for a reason. Not because it is a perfect legend that needs blind belief, but because it is a mirror for anyone who has ever felt the quiet take of, is this really all there is? This is the life story of Siddhartha Gautama, the one later known as the Buddha, told as a living path, not a museum piece. And as we move through it, keep two ideas close. First, awakening is not a lucky event. It is the result of repeated choices toward truth. Second, compassion is not softness. It is what happens when wisdom becomes human. Now let us begin where most people do not begin. Most people begin with the image of the Buddha as already serene, already above the world, already sitting under a tree like peace is effortless. But the real story starts earlier, inside a human mind that is wrestling with the same forces you wrestle with every day: craving and fear, comfort and uncertainty, identity and change, the desire to be safe, and the unavoidable truth that nothing stays the same. Siddhartha was born into privilege. He was raised in comfort, surrounded by beauty, with protection built around his senses. In many versions of the story, his family tried to shield him from anything that might disturb him. The intention may have been love, but the result was a life where suffering was hidden like a secret, as if suffering could be removed from reality by refusing to look at it. This is already a lesson, because many of us do the same thing in our own ways. We curate our feeds. We avoid hard conversations. We keep ourselves busy so we do not have to feel. We chase entertainment so we do not have to face the quiet. We build a palace out of distraction, and then we wonder why we feel numb inside. Siddhartha grew up inside that palace, and in the beginning, it worked. He had food, music, art, companionship, admiration, and every sign that the world was on his side. People around him expected him to become a powerful leader. They expected him to maintain the order that gave him comfort. But there is a moment that arrives for some people, not always loudly, sometimes like a faint crack in the wall. A moment when comfort stops being convincing. A moment when the heart asks a deeper question. Siddhartha began to feel that crack. He felt it as restlessness. Not restlessness like boredom, but restlessness like spiritual hunger. He would sit in beautiful rooms and still feel something missing. He would be surrounded by pleasure and still feel a kind of emptiness. He would be praised and still feel the strange sense that praise was not enough to answer the deeper question. What is life? This is not a flaw. This is actually the beginning of wisdom. Because when the mind stops being fully satisfied by surfaces, it starts searching for what is true beneath the surface. Then came the turning point that most people remember, often described as encounters that exposed him to reality beyond the palace walls. He saw sickness. He saw aging. He saw death. And he saw a person who had stepped out of ordinary chasing. Someone living with simplicity and inner direction. Whether you hear these as literal scenes or symbolic revelation, the psychological truth is the same. He realized suffering is not an exception. It is part of the human condition. And if suffering is part of the condition, then the real task is not to pretend it is not there. The real task is to understand it. When Siddhartha saw these realities, something inside him could not go back to sleep. This is another lesson. Once you truly see impermanence, you cannot unsee it. Once you truly see that everything changes, the mind faces a choice. It can cling harder, becoming more anxious, more controlling, more desperate, or it can wake up, becoming more honest, more grounded, more compassionate. Siddhartha chose wakefulness. He decided to leave comfort, not because comfort was evil, but because comfort had become a cage. He left the palace, not as an act of rebellion, but as an act of devotion to truth. Now pause here and feel how radical that is. Most people do the opposite. Most people feel the reality of aging and loss and uncertainty. And then they run deeper into distraction. They buy more. They chase more. They scroll more. They numb more. Siddhartha did the opposite. He walked toward the question. And that is the first act of real practice. Walking toward the question instead of running from it. He stepped into a world that was less predictable, less comfortable, and far more honest. He studied with teachers. He learned concentration. He explored philosophies. He experimented with ways of living that promised liberation. At one stage, he practiced extreme austerity, trying to overcome suffering through harshness and denial. This part of the story matters because it shows he did not become wise by simply rejecting luxury and instantly finding the perfect method. He tried. He struggled. He learned. And at some point, he realized that extreme self-denial was another form of attachment, another form of ego, just wearing a different costume. Ego can hide anywhere. It can hide in comfort. It can also hide in harshness. It can say, I will become pure by punishing myself. It can say, I will become special by suffering more than others. It can say, I will win liberation like a trophy. Siddhartha saw through that trap. This is where the middle way enters. Not indulgence, not punishment. A path that is grounded, humane, and sustainable. A path that does not depend on extremes. This is a lesson many people need right now, because so many people swing between overindulgence and self-punishment. They binge and then they shame themselves. They procrastinate and then they grind. They numb and then they force. They chase pleasure and then they punish the body for being human. The middle way is not boring. It is the most courageous path, because it asks you to meet reality without hiding and without attacking yourself. Siddhartha accepted nourishment. He regained strength. He chose to sit and face the mind directly. Now we arrive at the scene many people imagine. The moment under the tree. But do not picture this as a peaceful vacation. Picture it as the most honest confrontation a human being can have. He sat down and made a vow to himself. Not as stubbornness, but as devotion. He would not rise until he understood. This is grit, but the wise kind. Not the violent pushing kind, the steady returning kind, the kind that keeps choosing truth even when the mind begs for escape. As he sat, the mind did what minds do. It presented fear. It presented desire. It presented doubt. It presented distraction. It presented images meant to pull him away from stillness and clarity. In many traditions, these are personified as Mara, a symbol of the forces that keep the mind asleep. But whether you call it Mara or you call it conditioning, you know the experience. You sit still for even a few minutes, and the mind tries to convince you to move. It offers you worries about tomorrow. It offers you regrets about yesterday. It offers you cravings. It offers you shame. It offers you any story that will keep you from being fully present. Siddhartha stayed. He did not fight with hatred. He did not surrender with weakness. He observed. He understood. He saw clearly. And in that seeing, something shifted. The shift was not that the world became perfect. The shift was that the mind stopped being fooled. He realized the nature of suffering. He realized that craving creates suffering because craving demands life be other than it is. He realized that aversion creates suffering because aversion makes you fight reality instead of meeting it. He realized that ignorance creates suffering because when you do not see clearly, you keep repeating patterns, planting the same seeds, and then wondering why the same fruits appear. This is karma, not as superstition, but as habit and consequence. If you water anger, anger grows. If you water greed, greed grows. If you water compassion, compassion grows. If you water midnolson, midnolsons grows. You become what you practice. Siddhartha saw this at the deepest level, and that is awakening. Awakening is not floating above pain. Awakening is understanding the machinery of suffering so you stop feeding it. Then something else happened that is often overlooked. After awakening, he did not rush to build an empire. He did not rush to dominate the world. He did not become a person who needed everyone to applaud him. Instead, he turned toward compassion, because wisdom without compassion becomes cold. But wisdom naturally produces compassion when it is real. Because when you see clearly how beings suffer through confusion, you stop wanting to punish them. You start wanting to help them wake up. So the Buddha began teaching. He met people where they were. He spoke in ways they could understand. He did not demand perfection. He emphasized practice. Again and again, practice. Not magic, not shortcuts. Practice. Mindfulness. Meditation. Wisdom. Compassion. He taught that suffering has causes. And because it has causes, it can be reduced. This is not denial of pain. It is empowerment. If suffering were an fate, you would be helpless. But if suffering is shaped by causes, you can work with those causes. This is where the story becomes very personal for you. Because you might not live in a palace, but you live in patterns. You might not face a dramatic moment under a tree, but you face small moments every day where the mind tries to pull you away from clarity. A moment where you want to react instead of breathe. A moment where you want to blame instead of understand. A moment where you want to numb instead of feel. A moment where you want to chase approval instead of choose integrity. The Buddha story says those moments matter. Because destiny is built from repeated choices. Your life is not only what happens to you. Your life is also what you practice. Now let me tell you another story inside the story. Because teachings become real through examples. There was a man in the Buddha community named Chiron. Chiron had a quick temper. He wanted peace, but he wanted it fast, like ordering it online. He would meditate one day and feel calm. Then the next day someone would offend him, and he would explode with words. Afterward, he would feel shame and despair. He thought he was failing the path. He went to the Buddha and confessed, "I cannot change. I keep repeating the same anger." The Buddha did not scold him. He asked Chiron to look closely. When anger rises, what happens first? Chiron said he did not know. The Buddha said, "Then that is where practice begins." Chiron started paying attention. He noticed that before anger became words, it was heat in the chest. Before it became heat, it was a tightness in the jaw. Before it became tightness, it was a thought, a story. He disrespected me. Chiron realized anger was not an instant event. It was a chain. And if you can see the chain, you can interrupt it earlier. Not by suppression, but by awareness. So Chiron practiced one small thing. When he felt the first tightness, he took one breath. One breath does not sound like much, but one breath creates space. Space creates choice. Choice changes karma. Over time, Chiron started transforming. Not into a person who never felt anger. Into a person who did not obey anger blindly. That is inner freedom. That is the path in daily life. Now, there is another layer to the Buddha story that is crucial. The Buddha did not teach escape from life. He taught engagement with life through clarity. This means awakening does not make you detached in a cold way. It makes you attached less, so you can love more cleanly. When you cling less, you can care without controlling. When you fear less, you can speak truth without aggression. When you stop needing constant validation, you can help without resentment. That is compassion. Compassion is not a mood. It is a way of being that emerges from wisdom. Now, let us talk about the heart of the Buddha life story in a sentence. He saw suffering. He asked what causes it. He practiced until he understood. Then he taught compassionately. That arc can be your arc too. At whatever scale you live, you see your own suffering. You see the suffering in your relationships. You see the suffering in the world. You ask what causes it. Inside the mind and inside patterns. You practice, not for perfection, but for freedom. Then you share freedom through how you live. And you do not need to be famous to do that. You do not need to be a teacher with followers. You share freedom every time you choose a wise response instead of an impulsive reaction. You share freedom every time you stop dehumanizing someone. You share freedom every time you admit you were wrong without collapsing into shame. You share freedom every time you forgive without forgetting your boundaries. You share freedom every time you show compassion to yourself so you stop spilling pain onto others. This is where the story becomes deeply modern. Because we are living in an age where attention is constantly being stolen. And attention is the foundation of mindfulness. If you cannot hold attention, you cannot see clearly. If you cannot see clearly, you will be driven by every headline, every comment, every craving, every fear. So the Buddha story is not ancient. It is urgent. You might be thinking, what does this mean for my everyday life? Here is what it means in the simplest form. When you wake up, notice the first story your mind tells. Is it rush? Is it dread? Is it comparison? Is it self-criticism? Then take one breath. That breath is a small rebellion against unconsciousness. When you face stress, notice whether you are adding the second storm. The first storm is the event. The second storm is the story. The first storm might be a conflict. The second storm is, I am always disrespected. I will never be okay. Everything is ruined. Mindfulness helps you separate event from story. That separation is freedom. When you feel craving, whether it is craving for food, approval, or escape, notice the tightening. Desire is not the enemy. The tightening is the enemy. The tightening is what turns desire into suffering. When you loosen the tightening, you can choose wisely. You can enjoy without clinging. You can want without being possessed. You can act without being addicted. That is the middle way. Now I want to share something that often creates a strong resonance. Many people think the Buddha story is too far away because it sounds too big. A prince, a palace, leaving everything, enlightenment, teaching. But if you bring it down to the core, it is very close. It is the story of someone who stopped lying to himself. Stopped pretending comfort could protect him from reality. Stopped pretending distraction was peace. Stopped pretending identity was permanent. And chose to face the truth with courage. That courage is available to you. You might not leave a palace, but you can leave a habit. You can leave a pattern of self-abandonment. You can leave the habit of reacting instantly. You can leave the habit of numbing. You can leave the habit of performing. You can leave the habit of hating yourself into improvement. And you can choose practice. Practice is not glamorous. Practice is not viral. Practice is quiet. Practice is repeating the basics. Breath, body, awareness, ethics, return, and return again. That is why this story survives. Because it is not about a perfect man. It is about a path that any human mind can walk. Now, let me give you a final story from the field of everyday life. A woman named Sarah came to a meditation group because she felt her life was falling apart. Not in dramatic ways, but in exhaustion. She was tired of being the strong one. Tired of carrying others. Tired of smiling when she felt empty. She sat down, tried to meditate, and felt worse. Because stillness brought everything up. She almost quit. Then an older practitioner told her something simple. Do not meditate to feel good. Meditate to see clearly. Sarah stayed. She started with 2 minutes a day. Then 5. Then 10. Over months, she noticed she was less reactive with her family. She noticed she could feel sadness without drowning. She noticed she could set boundaries without guilt. She noticed she could apologize without shame. She noticed she could choose herself without becoming selfish. Her life did not become perfect. Her mind became freer. That is the Buddha story in modern clothes. And it is why I keep telling it. Now we come to the closing reflection. The part that often touches the deepest nerve. A lot of people spend their lives trying to build a life that cannot hurt them. But life will always include change. The wiser goal is to build a mind and heart that can meet change without breaking. That is what the Buddha did. He did not remove impermanence from existence. He removed ignorance from the mind. And when ignorance decreases, compassion increases. When compassion increases, life becomes lighter. Not because nothing painful happens, because pain stops turning into endless suffering. So here is my invitation to you. This week, choose one practice, one breath before you react, one moment of listening without planning your reply, one small boundary spoken kindly, one honest acknowledgement of a craving without obeying it, one act of compassion toward yourself when you make a mistake. And when you forget, do not punish yourself. Return. That returning is the whole path. In the comments, tell me what part of this story spoke to you the most. Was it leaving comfort? Was it facing impermanence? Was it the middle way? Was it the idea that suffering has causes? Was it the reminder that practice is built from small returns? And if you want more long-form stories that turn ancient wisdom into practical living, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share your thoughts so we can keep building a community that chooses awakening, wisdom, compassion, and a cleaner karma. Thank you for being here. See you in the next video.